Welcome to another exciting episode of Rogue Finances and Life, where we are life and financially sound. So for those Christians out there that has been reading the Bible and have imagined how some of these places in the Bible looks like, or even those places where Apostle Paul have walked through, if you're one of those Christians that imagine how these places actually look like. For today's episode, I am talking to and interviewing Mr. John Christopher Freme, which he has done just that. He has walked through some of the places where Apostle Paul has walked through. So without any further ado, let's get into this. For this episode, we have an interview with Mr. John Christopher Freme. He is an author and faculty member at an online university. He has lived internationally and enjoys combining his interests in theology and social concerns to help Christians become more aware of global issues so they can better live out their faith. So without any further ado, here's Mr. John Christopher Freme.
Hi, Jesus. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
Thank you. Thank you for being available. Your story is awesome. I really want to hear more about your travels, especially when you talk about traveling where Apostle Paul traveled. Oh yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, thanks. Happy to share about that. So I live in Turkey. I live in Istanbul, Turkey. So Jesus, you're in the Eastern time zone, so I'm 7 hours ahead of you. And so it is pretty far from the United States. And, when we think of like the Holy Land, or when we think of Bible places, most of us think about Jerusalem, Palestine, Israel. And yes, though that is the land, where Jesus walked. But there are other places as well, like where the Apostle Paul traveled. And that's kind of where I live. I live in Istanbul. So Paul probably didn't come through Istanbul where I live, but he came very near here. And so I have been on a journey mapping out the towns where the Apostle Paul stepped foot in on his various journeys through this land. And so I'm particularly interested in Turkey because this is where I live. My wife is Turkish. And so I've lived here since on and off since 2014. So a fairly long time. But, I realized that I didn't know a whole lot about the biblical history of Turkey. And I just didn't know as much as I should have known. And so that's why I'm on this journey in part, to get to know Turkey more, to get to know the connection between Paul and Turkey, and then hopefully to be able to share some of these experiences that I'm having with my readers.
Oh, that's awesome. So just tell us a little bit more about your journey.
Sure. Well, about 8 or 9 months ago, I ordered some books, and I sat down with this one hardback book that has a lot of pictures in it, and it has some maps as well of where Paul went. And I just went through and I read it very, very closely, and I looked at all the pictures, and I started writing down where it seemed like Paul traveled in Turkey, because he was through here. He has those 3 missionary journeys. So he's kind of zigzag back and forth, and so on and so forth. And so I just began sort of mapping out where he went. And then I realized, well, if I'm going to do this, then I need to have some kind of structure to it. So I can't go everywhere where Paul stepped foot, because, we don't know everywhere where he went. And then there's like places between towns that he went. And, I'm not going to travel across the whole country. But what I can do, I realize, is I can go to the actual towns where he went as listed in the book of Acts. So that made sense, right? I wouldn't go to everywhere Paul went, but I would go and I could go to the towns where he went. And so I mapped these out and I got some other books, and it's been a journey and I'm still learning. I've mapped out about 15, 16 towns where he went. And when I say towns, these were towns back then, but most of them aren't towns today. They're historical places today. Or it's just like a mound, like a small green mountain, and the city is actually gone.
Oh, wow.
So it's been a real journey because each of these places is unique and different and fascinating. And I'm more than halfway done. I'm not doing it all in one go, but I started about 3 months, 4 months or so ago. And I was gone for about 3 weeks and I came home. And then at some point I went out again for the second leg of the journey. And so, I have probably about 2 or 3 more legs of the journey to go. I'm just kind of going slowly and I'm trying to enjoy it. And I am enjoying it because there's so much to see and there's so many people to meet, so much good food to eat along the way, so much to learn because I'm not a historian. And so what I know about these places in terms of history and biblical history in the Bible is based on what I'm reading and learning from books and online. And so there's a big learning curve for me because I have to learn about these places to understand these places. Because when you go to a place like Ephesus, for example, I was just there about 2 weeks ago. Well, Ephesus is probably the biggest site of the places that I'm going. It's huge. And there are, I don't know, but probably millions of visitors that go every year. But when you go to Ephesus, a lot of the things that you see today weren't there when Paul was there. And a lot of the things that were there when Paul was there aren't there anymore. So there's a learning curve. So what exactly was here that Paul might have seen or touched and what wasn't? And so I'm trying to learn and discern this. And that's all part of the fun, but it's also part of the challenge.
That's great. That's great. So now, how did you prepare for your journey?
Well, I have that big picture book that I mentioned, and then I have 2 or 3 other sort of Bible history books about Turkey. And I am going through them, I want to say page by page or bit by bit. So they're kind of divided, not by chapter, but by town, actually. And so I'll look in my books, my 3 other books, and I will read the pages about that particular town. And sometimes I might go to a place and stay for a while. And so I'll read about it maybe on the bus ride there. Or if it's a bigger place, then I'll read while I'm there, at the place where I'm staying, for example. Just trying to learn about the place, the region, the history, the various times, the various pieces of history. And then just going and experiencing it. So the preparation would be, also learning things online, mapping these places out ahead of time in terms of like on paper, like an actual, piece of paper and a pen. I sat down a few months ago and I wrote down the places that I was going to go and, what I thought, what was there that I thought I should see, so on and so forth. And then it's just, reading about the places and just going to the places.
That's great. So what surprised you the most on your journey?
Wow, what's impressed me the most? I guess I would have to say the diversity of these places. So I mentioned that, some places like Ephesus are like an open museum. Actually, they are a museum. A lot of these places are owned and run by the government. So that's good because they're protected. There's an admission fee to go in. But then some places are very, very desolate, or there's not a museum there. There's like a green mound. And so one of the things that's impressive about Turkey is that the historical places, for example, these places that I'm going, are open to the public, and you can walk around them, and you can walk on them, and you can walk in them. So like when you go to Ephesus, for example, you're actually walking on the ancient street, and you're walking into the places, and you're looking at the places, and you can touch the things along the way. Um, so that's really interesting. Um, and then in terms of diversity, so you've got that place that's just so big and beautiful. But then there's another place that, you know, most people have never heard of, and that's called Lystra. And that's mentioned, maybe 2 or 3 times in the book of Acts. It's where Timothy was born, if I remember correctly. And Lystra is nothing but a mound with, some turtles on the top and a lot of flowers. And I saw a flower there, Jesus, that I had never seen before. And I'm not going to say that it's a miracle that it's there, that it's not anywhere else. But when I was there, I was really impressed. And yes, it was springtime, but I saw a red poppy. So this red flower that has, I think 4 big petals. And usually a red poppy is just red. It's just red. But the ones that I saw at the top of Lystra had a black cross in the middle of them. I had never seen, and I know a fair bit about flowers. I think I've looked at a lot of flowers, and I've studied them a bit in the past. But I had never seen a red poppy with like a black X, like a black cross in the middle. And I thought, wow, that is so beautiful. I was impressed by that, because I had never seen anything like that, and maybe I never will. So I would say just the flowers in the springtime when I was there in April, and the various sites when I went on the first leg of my journey, going to these places, I was really impressed with these flowers. And they were just so beautiful, and they just really almost testified to the beauty of this land, the beauty of these places, the miracles and the things that took place there, and just the beauty of nature. That God's land and God's earth is beautiful, and in some of these very dry and hot places, there's beautiful flowers. And so walking in these historical places, I was very, very happy to be able to be greeted by all of these flowers.
Well, that is so great. That's very awesome. Now, so after all this is over, right? So what are your plans for after this?
Yeah, well, as I go to these various sites, I take my iPhone with me. I have an old iPhone 6 Plus. It's nothing, it's not anything special. But I do have an app on my phone that lets me talk into my phone and then types out the words that I talk. It's not perfect at all, but what I do is whenever I go, like for example, when I was on the top of this mound of Lystra, I was just talking into my phone about what I was seeing, what I was thinking, what I was feeling, some things about the Bible that I had read about that land. And my hope is that whenever it's all said and done, that I put all these notes and things together into a devotional book. So I have one devotional book out now. It's a 7-day prayer guide, but I want this one to be a 30-day prayer guide, where, if let's say there's 15 or 16 sites I'm going to go to, then, about two days for each site. So a month of prayers and devotions and reflective questions. And so I want to write a book that introduces these places and these places where Paul went, and my time there, my story as well, in a devotional way. So it's not just a story about my travels, but it's a devotional story, so people can hopefully grow closer to God while they read these bits. So that's my hope, and that won't be out anytime soon. But people can follow along my journey. They can learn about when that book will be out if they wish. but that'll be out probably in 15, 18 months or so from now.
Oh, well, that's great. So now, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, you enjoy um, combining your interests in theology and social concerns to help the Christians become more aware of global issues, so they can live better out their faith. So how do you have done that to where you can help Christians?
Oh, good question. Yeah. So my first two books, one that came out a few years ago, was about homeless people. It's called Homeless at Harvard. Homeless at Harvard. And it's about both of those things. It's about people who are homeless who live next door to Harvard University. And I believe that that book introduces people to the world of the homeless, the world of people who are homeless. I mean, and it also introduces people to people who are homeless in their own voices. And that's also what I did in my second book that came out last year. That's called Seven Attitudes of the Helping Heart. And in Seven Attitudes of the Helping Heart, I introduced people in Cambodia who I met who are quite poor. And I share their stories. And I go through these, what I call seven attitudes of the helping heart, to be able to help Christians develop these seven attitudes like compassion and empathy and generosity, so on and so forth, to be able to develop these values and these attitudes in their hearts. So that way we can grow closer to God, we can help people more, and we can be better people. And so that's how I try to blend or connect my interests in, Christianity and theology, and also the concerns that are in the world.
Well, that's great. That's very great. So now that you have visited some of these places where Paul actually visited or walked or was, how does that help you in this with your closeness to God?
Yeah, that's a good question. I thought about this a little bit, and definitely my answer is that it is it is helping me understand the Bible better. Because I'll admit that the book of Acts was always a book that I just never really, I don't want to say it wasn't important to me. Of course it was, but I didn't feel really connected to it, I guess. It had been a long time since I read it. I didn't know all the stories in it. I couldn't remember them anyway. But this journey has made me do something very intentionally and in a very structured way. And going around to all the places in Turkey that are mentioned in Acts, where the Apostle Paul visited all these towns, meant or means that I have to know the book of Acts better than I did before. And so what that means is that I very recently, I carefully sort of walked myself through the book of Acts by reading it very carefully, taking notes, underlining passages. I printed it out on paper so I could write on it. And I just went through it, about 2 chapters a day. And so I would say that, I'm learning now the connection between, I'm learning that the things that are in the book of Acts that I had forgotten or didn't know. And then I'm learning how those are connected to Turkey, to this place where I live. And I'm remembering them. So when I think of Ephesus, or when I think of Lystra, or I think of these various places, I'm remembering some stories that are related to them. I'm remembering in Ephesus, for example, how the people got very upset because of what Paul was teaching, and they created a riot. And then for 2 hours, they went to the theater in Ephesus, and there was so much confusion. The Bible says that many people didn't even know why they were there. Just everybody in the town was there, and everybody was upset, but they didn't know why. And I was there in Ephesus, and I was there in the theater, and I was thinking about this, and I was reading about this and learning about it. And then I was sharing some of this with others. And that helps me remember. And I've been to these places where that riot started, and where the Apostle Paul, did his trade as a tent maker. And, standing on these places, reading about these places has ingrained or or put these stories inside my mind and my heart in a deeper way, so that it's not something I'm going to forget, but I'm going to remember this in a special way, I think.
Now, would you recommend anybody that can make it to those places actually take time to visit those places?
Well, that's a good question, Jesus. And, of course, we all need vacations and holidays, and there are actual trips and tours to Turkey and to Greece and to other places that, people can go if they don't want to go on their own. I wouldn't say that I recommend it unless somebody really, really wants to come here and do it. Of course, I would recommend, traveling and exploring and discovering things. But I think that that can be done, in our neighborhoods, in our communities, in our own state, or in wherever people are living. And they may not want to, or they may not need to spend a lot of money, to go far away. If they want to do that, that's great. If they want to just see a picture of these places, they can look those up online. So there's value, or there can be value. It also might be the case where people come here on a tour, let's say a 2-week tour, but they feel exhausted and they don't really get anything out of it. Or they're on a tour maybe, and the bus is taking them from place to place, and, they're learning about these things. And yes, it's going to touch their hearts, but maybe they could learn just as much at home. So I think it's just, that's a good question, but I think it's, each person should decide for themselves, what they really want to do, how best they can learn about it. And for some people, they may not be interested in seeing the Holy Land or seeing Turkey. They may just be interested in reading the Bible and reading about these places and imagining what these places look like. There's something very special about that too.
Oh, thank you. So now, if there's like a verse in the Bible that kind of have touched you, and you would like to share with my audience, my listeners?
Well, I don't have any particular verse at the top of my head, but I would say that the verse that, I would say that the verses that have touched me a lot on this journey relate to Paul's courage. So thinking about Lystra again, there's something in Acts about that story where, he's thrown out of that city and he's almost killed by the people. And he has so much courage that he went back. And I think that verse, and that passage tells us a lot about Paul's faith and Paul's courage and Paul's desire to do what he felt called to do. And I think that those kinds of verses about courage and about his passion can really speak to us.
That's great. That's awesome. One of the things that really, to me, when it comes to Apostle Paul, was how God transformed somebody that had so much hatred in his heart for Christians, that just one visit with God, Christ himself, and he went from hating Christians to the point where he wanted to kill them, to the point where he was willing to die for Christ and suffer for Christ. That it is so awesome.
Yes, indeed. He was so passionate about what he was called to do, and how he touched people's lives along the way. And he was very intentional, about where he went, what he did. The Bible talks about how, he was going to go to one place, but then he felt the Spirit of God saying, no, go to another place, and so then he went where he felt God was calling him to. And I think that that's very special as well.
Yeah, definitely. So now, one final thought for those newborn Christians that you might have some kind of for them.
Yeah. Well, let's see. So, we all go through difficult times, and the Bible is full of people that have experienced difficulties and challenges. There were difficulties and challenges back then, and there are difficulties and challenges now. And many times that relates to our faith, the challenges that we have related to that, whether that's fighting sin, or whether that's fighting people who don't like our faith, or whatever the case might be in your context. And I would say to aim to grow closer to God every day in the small things that you do. And that as you go along your journey, be inspired by the scriptures, be inspired by stories, remember these stories, and allow these stories to come upon you, and let the Holy Spirit come upon you and speak to you and through you in a very special way, so that you can live in a way that pleases God.
All right, thank you. That's great. Really, thank you. Awesome story. I really love. I kind of like as you was telling it, I kind of in my mind imagine how those places actually look like. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being available and sharing this encouraging word for somebody that who knows might be they can use it. So really, I really appreciate your time, and wish you many blessings.
Thank you so much, Jesus. And if anyone in your audience is interested in learning more about my journey, they could just go onto my website, John Christopher Freme, johnchristopherframe.com. There's a button on the website where they can download a map and some pictures of some of the places that I've gone, and they can learn a little bit more about my journey following the Apostle Paul.
All right. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. You have a blessed one.
You too.
So this is all the time we had for today. We thank again Mr. John Christopher Freme for talking about his journey. Just remember to subscribe to my channel and like my videos. After next time, see ya.